today. So John Kim is here to do a progressive movie review from Rethink Reviews, of course, on YouTube, Huffington Post, and rethinkreviews.net. Yes, nailed it. Okay, this week we're going to talk about The Corporation. Now let's take a look at John's review, and then we'll come back with facts as we usually do.
Running a business is a tough proposition. There are costs to be minimized at every turn. And at some point, the corporation says, let somebody else deal with that. Let's let somebody else supply the military power to the Middle East to protect the oil at its source. Let's let somebody else build the roads that we can drive these automobiles on. Let's let somebody else have those problems. And that is where externalities come from, that notion of let somebody else deal with that. I got all I can handle myself.
A corporation is an externalizing machine in the same way that a shark is a killing machine. Each one is designed in a very efficient way to accomplish particular objectives. In the achievement of those objectives, there isn't any question of malevolence or of will. The enterprise has within it, and the shark has within it, those characteristics that enable it to do that for which it was designed.
Thanks to the worst president in U.S. history, we're now saddled with one of the worst Supreme Courts in U.S. history, which recently passed down one of the worst rulings in U.S. history, in the case of Citizens United versus the FEC. In a stunning example of the kind of judicial activism and legislating from the bench that Republicans constantly whine about, the Roberts Court overturned multiple precedents to declare that corporations, domestic and apparently foreign, have an unlimited right to free speech when it comes to our elections, with free speech meaning the money they can spend on political advertising and advocacy. Now you might be asking, why do corporations have the right to free speech? They aren't people. And you'd be right, because they certainly aren't. But thanks to a questionable interpretation of a case in 1886, corporations are legally considered people, which begs the question, if corporations are people, what kind of people are they? That's a question we all need to be asking ourselves in this scary new country the Roberts Court has created. In the 2003 documentary, The Corporation, will give you an answer you'll never forget. The film starts with a history of the corporation, which was originally designed as a legal construct where a group of people was issued a charter by the government to provide some service to the community. The corporation could sign contracts, sue, and buy property just like a person. But when the 14th Amendment was passed in 1868 to give former slaves constitutional rights, corporations were able to sneak themselves in and demand that they too deserve the same rights as people. Despite the friendly personas corporations create for themselves, they're clearly not like you or I. The film makes the very persuasive argument that if a corporation were a person, it would most closely resemble a psychopath, someone with no morals or conscience and a complete inability to feel empathy. The film then goes through a personality diagnostic checklist, finding that corporations possess such psychopathic traits as a reckless disregard for the safety of others, repeated lying and manipulation, and an incapacity to feel guilt. To back up this explosive claim, the film examines dozens of cases where corporations display these psychopathic traits through cruelty to workers and animals, willingness to collude with fascistic regimes like the Nazis and dictatorships, and destruction of the environment through pollution and the plundering of natural resources. That's because no matter what anyone tells you, a corporation has only one objective: maximizing profits for shareholders. Any factors that might reduce profits are externalized, a clinical-sounding word that just means letting someone else deal with the mess you created, like dumping toxic waste into rivers regardless of who it hurts downstream because it would cost you money to deal with it responsibly. The film goes on to look at examples of how corporations are increasingly attempting to privatize and control our lives, from patenting forms of life, making it illegal to gather rainwater or save crop seeds, to censoring criticism of corporations in the corporate-owned media. The corporation enlists an impressive array of experts, including activists and critics of corporations like Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky, Michael Moore, and Naomi Klein, as well as their defenders like Milton Friedman, the father of modern Republican economic ideology. There are also interviews with businessmen who tried to profit off of 9/11 in the Iraq War, as well as industry insiders who develop insidious ways to sell products to you and your children. One of the more fascinating experts is Ray Anderson, the CEO of the world's largest carpet manufacturer, who one day saw the light, realized the harm caused by his company's products and our current corporate model, and set out to create a more sustainable way to do business. Republicans and even the ACLU are championing the Citizens United ruling as a victory for free speech, but I think this misses the most important point, that corporations shouldn't have the right to free speech because they're not people. Non-human legal constructs do not get American human rights, especially if, by their very design, they have the morals and empathy of a killbot. And don't give me the more speech is always good argument, because corporations can't speak because they're not people. And with free speech being defined as money spent on advertising, most actual people hardly have any free speech at all. You know who does? The killbots. Besides, does anyone feel that what's ailing our political system is a lack of corporate influence? But thanks to the Roberts Court, more corporate bot politicians and legislation is exactly what we'll be getting. Which is why you and everyone you know have to see The Corporation, so you can understand what kind of people were just handed an even bigger chunk of our democracy. I'm Jonathan Kim, and this is a Rethink Review.
All right, John, I've realized the problem with your reviews.
What's that?
I've now built up way too many movies I have to see.
Gotta keep your Netflix list, man.
Okay, so, but you seem to like this one a little more than some of the others. Am I getting that feeling right?
It makes a really strong and persuasive argument. I mean, the movie runs a little bit long. It's over 2 hours, which is hard for a documentary, but they've got a lot to say, and I think that whole thesis of if a corporation is a person, what kind of person is it, is really the most important question.
The thing I say all the time is, look, I don't think corporations are evil, right? And I understand that they're probably a necessary part of capitalism, right? But at the same time, you have to understand what the rules are and what their incentives are and what they're structured as. And they're structured to be, in your words, a killbot, right? Make money, make money, make money. It's not structured to care about your feelings. So once you know that, then you can structure rules and regulations around that. But to assume that they're going to be benevolent, well, it's just not factual. It's not just stupid. It's not even closely related to the facts.
Yeah,
if you know and respect and even, quote unquote, like corporations, you think they're an important part of society, even if you believe all those things, which are legitimate things to believe, you still can't believe that they're going to be benevolent. That's not how they're structured.
Right, yeah, I mean, there's a quote in the movie from Baron Thurlow who said, a corporation, it has no soul to save and no body to incarcerate. And even Milton Friedman said the corporation cannot be ethical, its only responsibility is to make a profit. It cannot be ethical.
Right, I mean, but that's how it's built.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important realization, if you ask me. Now, the way the corporations have taken advantage of the 14th Amendment is amazing. So tell us a little bit more about that, John.
Okay, so the 14th Amendment, which was passed in 1868, and it was basically to undo the Dred Scott decision, which said that blacks in America are property, they're not actually people. So this was to give constitutional rights to people who lived in the U.S. But this got used by corporations in a way to basically say, oh, we're people too. They kind of snuck this in. In 1886, the Supreme Court eliminated 230 state laws that regulated corporations. And from 1890 to 1910, in 14th Amendment cases, 19 of those cases had to deal with black people and 288 had to do with corporations.
Okay. Now, look, understand that the issues relating to black civil rights are not going to come up as often, for whatever reason, as they do with corporations. There's so many more corporations. You know, well, there's more black people than corporations, but
they have the money to bring the trials.
Right, and then there's conflicts between corporations, et cetera. So I get that, right? But at the same time, there's something so insidious about taking something that's supposed to help, at that point, certainly, the most disadvantaged people in the country, and using it to help the most advantaged people in the country.
Right.
You know, and so corporations are like, oh, great, they want to help black people. Let's use that to help ourselves and make more money. And as we know, of course, black people were crushed in this country for at least another 100 years.
Right.
Right? And so they have a way of capturing whatever is happening and redirecting the benefit to themselves, right? Now, their main way of doing that is buying politicians.
Right.
Okay, which now they're going to get to buy much, much easier. But this goes all the way back to Edison, right?
Yeah, basically during the time of the robber barons, Thomas Edison promised New Jersey politicians $1,000 each for favorable legislation. Daniel Drew and Jay Gould spent $1 million each to bribe the New York legislature. They want them to legalize issuing $8 million in what's called watered stock, which is stock that does not represent real value on the Erie Railroad.
So, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're still selling the same bullshit on Wall Street, and we're still getting the politicians to say it's okay. And, you know, and it turns out corrupt New Jersey politicians, it started with Edison, yeah. Right? It didn't start with the Sopranos. So, yeah, go ahead.
And actually, I mean, in 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed, which made it illegal to form a, quote, combination or conspiracy to restrain trade in interstate or foreign commerce. And people are like, oh, this is great for regular people. But I think in a letter that Sherman wrote, he said it was basically wasn't done because it was the right thing. He said, quote, "You must heed their appeal or be ready for the socialist, the communist, the nihilist. Society is now disturbed by forces never felt before." That's why that had to be passed. And then in 1895, the Supreme Court essentially gutted the Sherman Antitrust Act to make it harmless.
All right, now think about what John is saying, because that's really important. So when you hear these same socialist, Marxist, Maoist, all that stuff, that's so old school. That's the stuff the corporations have been using, that line of attack, forever to get their way. They want to pass the laws, they want to, whatever it does to take advantage and make more money, because that is in their nature, right? That is what they're supposed to do, right? And the government is supposed to look out for us so they don't crush us in the meanwhile. But the problem is, as we've talked about before, they buy the government. And once they buy the government, we're hosed, okay? Because they're going to do whatever it takes to make more money.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in terms of this being an old argument, also, I mean, now if you talk about, well, you know, we need unions, we need workers' rights, people are like, oh, workers of the world unite, you're a communist. But it's like, if you're not on the side of the workers, whose side are you on? What, you know, you have to be on the side of the corporations, yet no one is, I don't know if there's a good word for that yet, but I think we need to come up with one so we can combat that socialist charge.
Well, they're corporatists, right? Certainly the politicians. But look, that's the thing, right? That's what's so nefarious about it, because Fox News Channel and Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, they don't tell you, I'm on the side of corporate America. They don't say, hey, I'm on the side of the guys who want to crush your soul and make as much money off you as possible. And look, and again, let's not get hyperbole. Nike doesn't want to crush your soul. They just want to make as much money as they can off you.
They want to crush someone in Malaysia's soul or something like that.
Well, that might be true.
They put up the shoes for, you know, a nickel a day. But.
Right, but that's, you know, look, that's a whole different argument, right? But they want to make as much money as possible. So Glenn Beck doesn't want to say, hey, look, I want to help Goldman Sachs. I want to help Coca-Cola make more money off you, right? So instead, he turns it around and says anybody who is for the workers is a socialist, is a communist, right? So, but what he's really telling you is anybody who's trying to help you is the bad guy. That's an argument that's as old as time, as old as America, right? As old as corporations, where they turn it around and anyone trying to help you is the bad guy. So don't believe the hype. Now, real quick, let's also do, you know, and I just want to give you credit for one more thing, John. I love what you said at the end there, where you said, you know, this is supposed to give free speech rights, and it does for the corporations. But in reality, it doesn't give it to the people. Most actual people don't have enough money to buy a political ad, right? So our speech gets drowned out by corporations that are not people, that shouldn't have inalienable rights given to them by their creator. We are their creator. Why did we give them that? They weren't inalienable. They didn't have to have that. But we didn't give it to them. Roberts did. And by the way, let me connect that all the way around. Who picked Roberts? George W. Bush. Who picked George W. Bush? Corporate America.
Yep.
So, and that's how this thing goes around. And it's been going around like that for a long time. Let me ask you about Union Pacific and what they did, if you could find that.
Oh, you mean the Southern Pacific Railroad, that case where corporate personhood came out? It's really amazing. So it was a case in California where the state constitution, they passed an amendment saying that you couldn't, the right to deduct the amount of a railroad's debts from the taxable value of the property, which was individuals could do that. They wouldn't have to pay tax if they had debt on something. So anyway, Southern Pacific Railroad challenged this. And they took it all the way to the Supreme Court. The state legislature ruled against them, and then they used the Southern Pacific Railroad used the Jurisdiction and Removal Act of 1875, which was a law that helped black people bypass hostile Southern state courts if they were denied justice. Southern Pacific used that to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And then in the ruling, there was nothing about corporate personhood. Basically, the court reporter who wrote like the summary of the case that then goes into the books, his name was J.C. Bancroft Davis, and he wrote, "The court does not wish to hear argument on the question whether the provision in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which forbids a state to deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, applies to these corporations. We are all of the opinion that it does." So basically he said they didn't talk about the 14th Amendment in this case because they all agree that corporations are people.
At best, that's what you would call in law dictum, right? And it's not really necessarily the dictum of the court, it's a dictum of the court reporter. Dictum means it's not the heart of the case. It's just an, oh, by the way, an aside that they say in a case.
And also, J.C. Bancroft Davis was former president of Newburgh and New York Railway.
Isn't that convenient? And he's the one that decided.
I mean, there's got to be.
We all agree, of course, corporations are people.
I mean, how is a former president of a railroad a court reporter? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like whether
Right.
he was a plant that like they knew that this case was coming. They're like, oh, let's get this guy in there. And then what does he do? He says, you know, as summarizing the case, oh, and by the way, corporations are people, right? Yeah. And that was it. That was where it all started.
And with that little crack, they just pour it on in, and then it all connects to the same thing. Use laws that are supposed to help the most disadvantaged to help themselves, and then do propaganda to make it seem the exact opposite. So everybody, doesn't mean you should hate corporations, in my opinion. Okay, and jobs, etc. A lot of our stocks that we own are in corporations. We're partly the owners of some of these corporations, certainly through our pension funds. But it does mean beware of what they do and make sure that there's a check on them. Otherwise, they will, by their nature, run amok.
Yeah, at best, all they do is they sell you something that doesn't break at a reasonable price. I'm not going to like jump up and down because they do that. That's what they're supposed to do. It's not a gift.
That's a great point. All right, John Kim, everybody check out Rethink Reviews on YouTube, Huffington Post, and rethinkreviews.net.